Thanks for having me. Beautiful school. I've never been here before. I'm a lifelong Rhode Islander. I grew up in Burrillville, Rhode Island. Anyone ever hear of Burrillville, Rhode Island? Yeah. Go Broncos. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my house. I think it's my house. Carolyn, my boss, she doesn't feel the same way. But I was a struggling filmmaker for most of my career. I did a bunch of documentaries, mostly Rhode Island born. 2007, I made a documentary about Rocky Point Park, which played in theaters locally. It was like my one big hit. I was on my way to being a one-hit wonder when Carolyn Rafalian and I met in 2011, and she hired me to start working for her little jewelry company called Alex and Ani. How many people here have heard of Alex and Ani? Yeah, thank you for the love. So in 2011, I started working for her, shooting video for her brands. At the time, we had 3 stores, and we were working out of the basement of her father's jewelry factory in Cranston, Rhode Island. Today, we have 115 stores all over the world, and we're closing in on a $500 million brand. That's what they tell me. So, but more importantly, in 2012, I was there when Carolyn Rafalian bought Belcourt, formerly Belcourt Castle, as it was known from 1956 on. And Belcourt became my new passion. And for the last 7 years or so, I've been documenting the progress of the restoration and researching the house's rich history. And I imagine most of you know about Marble House and the Breakers and the other Gilded Age mansions. I saw, I think in January, you had another lecturer talk a little bit about the Gilded Age mansion. Is that right? Maybe? Yes. But this was the best house of them all, and it's the most unique, and I'll tell you why. So we start with my boy, Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont. Okay, OHP was he was named after his famous uncle. I'm going to get into his parents in 1 second in a minute because his parents are important as to why Newport, Rhode Island is the place for Oliver's house. Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont was not the best student. He was not the best Navy man. He graduated from the Naval Academy, but he only spent 11 months in the Navy because he didn't want to be in the Navy anymore, and his dad said okay and paid for him to get out of the Navy. Oliver Belmont did not really follow in his father's footsteps. His father was a powerful banker, and Oliver was not into that either. Oliver liked fashion, and he liked leisure and pleasure, and hanging out with his friends. And he quickly, let me show you August. Okay, so August Belmont was the polar opposite of his son Oliver. Worked real hard from the age of 14. Started as a janitor at the House of Rothschild, who they were international bankers, had lots of money. And he single-handedly saved their businesses in the 1830s in America. And he opened up a little office on Wall Street in New York. And became one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. In 1847, he marries Caroline Slidell Perry, who was famous in Newport, from a famous Newport family. Her uncle is Oliver Hazard Perry. There's a statue of him outside of City Hall at Newport. He's doing like this. Something like that. He was a famous naval hero. Her father was a commodore who opened trade with Japan in the 1850s. If you know anything about opening trade in Japan in the 1850s, it was basically taking a bunch of war boats and bringing it to Japan and saying, you will trade with us, but still we call it opening trade. So we have this, August Belmont has a ton of money. Caroline is from Newport, and in 1860 they take all their kids to Newport for the summer. They love it so much that they end up buying a small piece of land, 14 acres, and they build a house on it called By the Sea. And Oliver and his brothers and sisters start spending all their summers in Newport. And this is really why Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont decides to build his house in Newport, because of the connection to the land and to the island itself. So back to Oliver. In 1890, his dad passes away, and Oliver gets a ton of money. So he decides that he wants to build his own summer villa in Newport, like all the other rich people from New York. He wants to build his own. Oliver really loves horses, however. He is a champion coach driver. It's called four in the hand. You have four reins, two horses, and he becomes really good at it. He also, his father is a horse breeder as well. The Belmont Stakes, which is one of the major races of the Triple Crown in horse racing, is named after Belmont, August Belmont, his father. So horses are in the family. And he contacts one of the most famous architects in the country at the time, this guy, Richard Morris Hunt, who built just about everything you see in Newport. In New York City, actually. A lot of things in New York City. There's a Statue of Liberty in New York City. He built a pedestal. He designed and built a pedestal for that. So you've got Richard Morris Hunt in 1891. He meets with Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont to start construction on a one-bedroom stable for his horses. A place where he could party and have lavish balls and entertaining receptions and guests, but also a place where he can keep his collection of prized horses. I have a little video I made about Richard Morris Hunt, which is 45 seconds. Check it.
Richard Morris Hunt was in his time one of the great American architects. I think Belcourt shows the diversity of Hunt. He is sometimes thought of as this McMansion architect. But this is the most different thing in the world from that. This is a very, very different sort of a thing that is here. I wish that at times that the people that came here went out and looked at Hunt's early work, such as the Griswold House, and understood that that's him. Come down here and take a look at this, and you just see that he was really he was a genius as an architect.
So Richard Morris Hunt. 1891, he starts construction. My favorite story about construction is that in the garage of the house, the coach house, it takes 3 years to lay the floor. It's Italian marble. It's a mosaic of Italian marble. And it took artisans 3 years to lay the floor in his garage. Okay, pretty cool. The newspapers started writing about this place. They called it the finest combination of a villa stable to be found in America. Here's the way it looks in 1895. They contracted a photographer who took a number of pictures of the house, and they're at the Library of Congress. We were able to get copies. So these are the main driveways. This is the front door, the original front door of the house. And the carriage house is on this entire first floor. On the other side of the building, in the middle of the building is a courtyard for the horses. And on the other side of the building was a stable that could have up to 30 horses. The stalls were made out of teak. They had golden nameplates. The horses actually lived there more comfortable than the servants. They were pampered every night, and at most, Oliver had his 8 prize-winning horses there. Each one had their own groomsman. So there was one groomsman per horse. And there's a couple pictures of the stables I'll show you. But this is, so you would drive your carriage, up, get dropped off at the front door, and then your carriage would be brought into the house. Your horses would be escorted into the courtyard or the stables, and then the carriages would be kept in this lower room, the coach house. This is the coach house in 1895. I'll tell you what happened to it in a minute and what it looks like. Here we go. Here's the stables. And then this is the ballroom upstairs. And this is where Oliver had his first party. It was finished, the building was finished in 1893, late 1893. Finishing touches were put on the house in 1894. And he was supposed to party there for the first time on July 4th of 1894. However, he was mugged on his way to Newport from New York City and hospitalized. It would be almost a full another year before he was able to have his first party in Belcourt. And when he did, all of the country was talking about it. This newspaper article is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Every newspaper in America picked up information about this party. It was on September 1st, 1895. I told you he was into fashion. He wore a pink hunting coat with a canary-colored waistcoat. He traveled the world previously to owning this building, and he collected animals that people have never seen before, and he kept them in the courtyard for the party. Monkeys were illuminated in cages. There was exotic birds throughout the grounds. They would do some dancing in that ballroom I showed you. They did some dancing and some bachelor games, things like they would put a sheet up, and the men would put their hand up on one side of the sheet, and the women would put their hand on the other side of the sheet, and they would drop the sheet, and those people would dance. He was a bachelor at the time. He did have a first marriage, but he got divorced during the honeymoon. Because he wasn't really good at marriage either. Remember I told you all the things he was good at? Marriage was not one of them, until he met the love of his life. There's a couple more things about his party. He hired 2 Egyptian bodyguards after he was jumped. One of them was 6'5". His name was Azar. I'm trying to hunt down photographs of Azar. He allegedly slept outside of Oliver's bedroom with a knife in his mouth. The other interesting thing that Oliver had at his house, he had what is called a tiger. It's not an actual tiger, but it's a small man. Oliver's tiger was British and 3 feet tall. And his normal day-to-day job would be, so say I was going to the store in Newport in the 1890s, I would get on a carriage with the horses, ride to the store. Well, the tiger would be in the back of the carriage. And when I went into the store, he would mind the horses, clean up any poop. Maybe he would walk them around a little bit, make sure no one steals the horses. I don't know why he was 3 feet tall. I'm guessing maybe he fit in the carriage easier. But he ended up dressing like, he would dress up at all the parties and give out the party favors. At the first party, he dressed up like Cuban and gave out the party favors. Very interesting place to be at the time. So I told you about the house that he built. It was a villa stable. It was a bachelor pad for him and his horses. It had 1 bedroom. He finished it in September of 1895. But he had a girlfriend. First, it was his best friend, Alva. When they were best friends, she was Alva Vanderbilt. And she was one of the wealthiest, most powerful women in the world at the time. And she was in a really bad relationship with both her husband and herself, who were cheating on each other. Her affair was with Oliver Belmont. She had a long-running friendship and then a long-running affair with Oliver Belmont. And then, to huge scandal in 1895, she divorced her husband, William K. Vanderbilt, and in the divorce got Marble House, the beautiful house made out of marble that's on Bellevue Ave. Then, in January of 1896, they basically came forward and said, we are in love, and they got married themselves in New York City. As a wedding present, she got Belcourt. So Alva now had both 2 mansions on Bellevue Avenue. Alva always said that she married first for money and then married second for love. And Oliver and Alva moved into Belcourt. This, by the way, was only for 6 to 8 weeks of the year. They lived in New York City or on Long Island the rest of the time. But from 1896 to 1908, when Oliver died, Alva and Oliver spent their time fixing up Belcourt and changing it, becoming less of a stable and more of a place to have elaborate parties. Okay? She spent about $30,000 a week on parties in 1896, 7, 8, 1899, threw a huge party in 1900, threw 2 huge parties in 1901, a huge party in 1902, 2 huge parties in 1903, took 1904 and 5 off from partying, and then resumed partying in 1906, 07 up until his death in 1908. Every single party, she changed the house. She turned the coach house. She eventually convinced Oliver to get the horses to the other side of the building. She moved the coaches off the premises, and she turned that coach house into a huge party room or like a reception hall. She also, you can see here, there are no driveways anymore. She got rid of the driveways so you couldn't drive up into the building. And she added an archway, which you'll see in the modern pictures show you in a second. She also built herself a bedroom, because, she needed to have a bedroom. It has a sunken bathroom, boudoir. It's really beautiful. And she also added, which is no longer there, she added an apartment for her son. And her son was struggling in English one summer, so she built an apartment for him, the tutor. So the tutor stayed in that room right there, above the stables over here. She redirected the stairs numerous times to make it easier for her guests to get upstairs to party. She completely reconstructed the courtyard entrance and changed the entrances to the building. So recap, Oliver had his bachelor pad for about 3 months before his wife moved in and started changing it all around. Oliver dies in 1908. He had an appendectomy, which I'm gathering in 1908 he did not want to have that surgery. We live from that surgery today. He did not live from that surgery then. He got sick and died. She was devastated, closed Belcourt, and moved to England, where she took up women's suffrage. And when she came back, she had 3 different stages of her life. First was marrying William K. Vanderbilt and being rich. Second was marrying for love and being rich, marrying Oliver. And then she jumped into women's suffrage and became a militant feminist. She once said, her 2 famous quotes are, "Pray to God, she will help you." And her second great quote is, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically said, if women don't get the right to vote, then we need to take up arms and fight back. So, luckily women got to vote without too much violence. That's a very interesting woman. You should Google her, or Bing, if you use Bing. Okay, so quickly I want to get to what happened to the house after 1908. So Oliver dies in 1908. The Belmonts, who did not like Oliver at all. This is Perry, the older brother of Oliver. They move in for a little while. Houdini performs at the house in 1912. They summer there for a number of years. They try to sell it and to no takers. They try to make it into a hotel. Doesn't work. And then finally in 1940, they sell the house to George Waterman Jr. He's the guy in the middle. He wanted to put in an automobile museum. Newport said no, so he sold it a couple of years later. He started to work on the house as well, did a number of changes, and then the city of Newport would not let him have an automobile museum there, so he sold it. And he sells it to a gentleman by the name of Edward Dunn, who doesn't do anything with the house until 1954. He doesn't even go there. And at one point, there's a Dutch painter who moves in and squats there for a bunch of years, and just paints. And Edward Dunn doesn't even know he's living in the house. He sells Belcourt to Elaine and Lois Lorillard. The Lorillards are from Big Tobacco Money. Elaine and Lois are kind of like these Greenwich Village hippies. They're big into jazz. And one night at a bar in Boston, they meet up with a guy by the name of George Bean. And George Bean and the Lorillards have this great idea to put on a jazz festival outside in Newport, which is still the Newport Jazz Festival, which exists today. It was originally going to be all held at Belcourt. They had a couple of concerts there before the city of Newport said no concerts, no fun to be had in Newport. So the Lorillards, since they can't have parties and jazz there, they sell it in 1956. And they sell it to a family of antique owners by the name of the Tinnies. And they live in the house from 1956 to 2012. They didn't really have the means to keep the house up, so they filled it with their antiques, and it kind of started to get disheveled and run down a little bit. And then they also claimed that it was haunted. But everything you probably know about Belcourt today is from the Tinney family. They said there were ghosts in there. They did a lot of ghost tours. They threw a lot of really big parties. They did medieval reenactments, lots of interesting weddings. In 2012, the last living Tinney, Harley Tinney, sells this house to Carolyn Raphalian in 2012. The Tinneys bought the house for $25,000, sold it to my boss for $3.6 million. It's a pretty good payday. And then, for me, my life starts at Belcourt on November 11th, 2012, where I was told that to cover the moment where she got the keys for the first time from Harley, and that's Carolyn getting the keys to the house. From then, I started to document both the history and the restoration of this house. And we've been restoring this house for the last 6 years or so, and we're still restoring the house. Today, we have guided tours that will show you. Basically, the house is empty at this point. We're just starting to put furniture back in. But it's a really great tour where it allows you to see the architectural wonder that is this house. Half villa, half stable, and then turned into a party pad later on. I'm going to show you, this video is a couple minutes, and I'd love to take questions. The video you're going to see is just a highlight of all of the different restoration efforts and techniques that they've used. Lots of time lapse. There are 45 450-foot geothermal wells dug throughout the entire property. And then there are solar panels on top of the building, which feed the electricity for the geothermal wells. The geothermal wells allow Belcourt to be cooled in the summer and warm in the winter without really having to burn any fossil fuels. And let's see, then electrical, a lot of electrical updates. And in general, just cleaning up, a lot of cleaning up to do. And then uncovering a lot of things that the Tinnies had put plaster over. So they had plastered over a lot of the original walls. So we had a lot of deconstruction. We found what looked like batteries, like an old system of batteries that they probably used in the early 1890s to give power to the stables. We're trying to figure out exactly what that, we just found that recently. We did find a really interesting, it's in the shape of a piano box, and it's a crate. And we found it up in the attic, and it had Oliver Belmont's name on it and shipping address. And then we opened it, and on the inside there was a little tiny piece of paper glued, and it was in French, and I used Google Translate to figure out that it was directions on extracting the horse from the box. So I was like, wait a second, because it was really a small, it's not that big of a box for a horse.
So we looked up, there was a name on the French transcription, and the name was Dr. Ozu, who was known for anatomical, like medical school figures of animals. So they were like vets who would learn how to, work all the different body parts. And that's what that was. We don't know where the real one is, but we have the box that came in. So that's kind of cool. We found some indirect lighting, light bulbs and bulbs from Edison, did the lighting in one of the rooms. We found some bulbs from that. That's about it. Yeah. Carolyn really just wanted it to be as close to the original design as possible, which we know we can't get to because we'd have to rebuild the stables, which is going to actually become our museum gallery. We're going to be able to wait for tourists. That's what we're hoping to build out the stables. But we basically just, the first step was removing and saving the house, making sure that it was going to be here for generations to come. And then it's just a matter of trying to figure out the best we can with the research that we've been doing, the best way to handle each of the rooms and what they probably look like and what they felt like. So we're doing the best we can, but we're probably not going to make the ballroom downstairs a coach house again. Because we kind of like having parties in there. And the ballroom on the second floor. Originally, Oliver Belmont would have musicians as a musician's row on the third floor, overlooking that ballroom, and the acoustics in that room were just out of control. The room is obviously built for music. The original organ, we don't know what happened to the original one, but the Tinney family, sometime in the late 1950s, actually added 9 feet to the roof and put their own organ in, which is there today. It worked for like a day, and I tried to play Iron Maiden on it, but I really didn't take it. Now it doesn't work anymore. But we hope to get it refurbished. But it's expensive, and it's a really old school, I've been told it's like a dinosaur of organs. It was broken to me, but Carolyn has her own architect. His name is Shaheen Morzine. He's an Iranian-American, and he designs and builds all our stores, all Valentine stores. We just opened a new restaurant on Main Street. He designed that, and he leads the charge in the architecture room. He's like our new school Richard Morris Hunt. Harley Tinney has a really interesting history. In 1960, she was a tour guide, and then she met the oldest son and married him. They got married in Belcourt. They had their honeymoon in Belcourt, and they lived the rest of their lives in Belcourt until 2012 when she sold it. She did live in the house all the way up until that point, though. She wants it to be a legacy for her children, for her family. And, when she was a little girl, she grew up around. When she was a little girl, she went to Newport and always wanted to have a mansion. So this one came up, and it was too good to pass up. She sees it as an opportunity to have, she wants to have, we have some authors coming to speak, some best-selling authors are coming to speak, and we've been doing a lot of really interesting events. I think she wants to have like speaker series and maybe a film series and an art gallery, and she just wants to share it for she really is, and we've worked with her for a long time. She is a really wonderful, genuine woman, and very powerful, very confident, and I love working for her. One of the things that we just got back into the house is in that ballroom, this room here. This ballroom here, you can see this armor here. Oliver Belmont had an armor collection that was worth close to $1 million then. It included, there's 2 medieval knights on horseback that were near the fireplace in jousting attire. We don't have any of that stuff, and I don't know where it went, but the Tinneys had an armor collection, including a samurai from the 15th century, I think. Old. It doesn't fit me. We started bringing that stuff back to Belcourt. So this room, I have to say, is pretty close to the way Oliver kept it. It has his armor collection. This room has 15th century stained glass. This room is just unbelievable. It literally, it takes your breath away when you enter the room. It's just, the acoustics are great. You can just see people dancing. Like with that weird sheet. There is Wi-Fi, yeah. It's pretty good too, I have to say. And the password, Well, geothermal wells and solar panels, Wi-Fi. We put in a projector and a screen. It has like a bonus system, so it can bump music through the whole house, which is kind of cool. Oliver and Albert would love that. That's about it. The fireplaces are gas now. You just a little clicker, turn them on. It's a little different than the way it was. But that's about it.